Hey everybody, what's up? It's Friday. We're back from Las Vegas, MJ Biz all week. This is the TDR Traded Black podcast here on the Gonzaga Television Network. I'm your host, Shad Dales. Interesting week to say the least. Lots to dive into. Some of the stuff that we heard in Vegas pertaining to the industry and, of course, rescheduling heading into perhaps later this year, going into next year. We'll break all that down as well while we were gone and why you should watch this podcast today. Cybin released extremely strong data again this week, and our guest of the week, CEO Doug Drysdale, is going to be joining us in a couple of minutes to talk about the significance of this all and some of the feedback that he's getting from biotech analysts and institutions. So we will get into that, but first, let's welcome in the two co-hosts, Benjamin A. Smith, lead financial writer and analyst for TDR, along with Anthony Varrell, millennial entrepreneur. How you feeling today after taking the red eye home last night? I feel like I saw you about 3 hours ago.
Great, running on zero sleep. I went straight from the plane to the gym and then been at my desk ever since. So yeah. I'm looking forward to getting this wrapped up and shutting down for the day.
I can only imagine. Me as well. Ben, good to see you. How was the week, brother? Oh, I think you're on mute, Ben.
Ben, you're on mute.
We'll get to Ben in just a second. All right, let's jump right into things. There you are, buddy. Good to hear from you.
Yeah, it was good. Pretty quiet on here on the capital markets front, but we were watching the streams on in Vegas, and good job, guys.
Yeah, appreciate it. Let's jump into our first segment, Into the Wire, where we have basically highlight biggest announcements in cannabis, psychedelics, crypto, and AI, and we focus on cannabis first, Anthony, and cannabis giant Trulieve, who announced today that the $136 million that they announced a couple weeks ago to deploy and shore up the balance sheet, it became official today. What's your feedback? I know we had Kim on a couple weeks ago, but now that this is official, we got mixed reviews from people that we spoke to in Vegas, but what's your thoughts on this now becoming official?
My thoughts are, Kim, congratulations. You got it done. $136 million well spent. Debt's off the balance sheet. Company is looking forward from a financial perspective. And I mean, this is what we want to see. I mean, we've seen some mixed deals in the space to where companies are kicking their debt down the road. They're doing some sort of conversion down the road with the lenders. She got the cash together and paid off the debt in its entirety. And Trulieve is that much for the better today because of this. I'm looking very much so forward to what the cash position looks like at the end of this quarter, what the cash position looks like next quarter. And I mean, if we get some sort of regulatory reform and clarity around 280E and some sort of retroactive tax, Trulieve is going to be looking good regardless if that happens or not moving forward. I mean, I think this is about $195 million in debt being retired in the last year. As far as everything in my book, it's a big net positive for the business.
Yeah, for sure. What's up, everybody? Good to see you. Happy Friday. A lot of people reaching out. Hello, Anthony. Looks like you got a little bit of fan base from Terry Daniels. That's great. But, you know, for the most part, before we get into our next topic about Ohio, what was your takeaway, Ben, on basically this becoming official today, and guess some of the sentiment that Anthony announced about the longevity and long-term health for Trulieve?
Yeah, anytime a company can retire debt, it is a good thing. And this is a lot of debt being retired. So it's going to reduce interest payments, and that's going to flow to the balance sheet. So I think it's a good thing. Yeah, nothing but a good thing whenever it can be done in a fairly optimal way and with not too much dilution on the books.
Yeah. I think the big takeaway, too, from what we saw this week in Vegas, that if we see rescheduling, whenever that happens at some point, hopefully, fingers crossed next year, some of the banking people that we spoke with, Anthony, they said lending is obviously, you know, common sense is going to go through the roof, but pretty encouraging to hear from like the horse's mouth that basically said lending is going to take off in a hurry should we see rescheduling, which is going to be great for the space, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to see aggressive capital deployment in the event that we do get rescheduling. Lenders are going to come in. You're going to see more traditional lenders come in. Maramed had that refinance last week with a true institutional bank at a very generous rate. I think that we see a lot more of that on the heels of rescheduling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's going to be good too. That's a good point because Maramed actually refinanced with an actual bank as opposed to Chicago Atlantic, which is a lender that is not a traditional bank. So they lend at higher rates. So you'll see a lot of savings there as well when the refinances come, when they're able to go to a chartered bank as opposed to what's available right now.
Is that public news yet? The bank that they worked with?
Not that I heard of.
I didn't read the AK. I think the AK just disclosed the rate, not the actual lender.
What was the rate?
Don't know yet.
It was about 8 and change.
Was it
8 and change? Okay, it was up around 13.25 before. So I mean that's a good 500 basis points. It's a lot of savings when you're talking about that kind of money.
Well, needless to say, lots of rumors floating around this week about just some of the companies that were involved in some of these lendings and what's going to happen in the future, and some of these companies that want to get involved in the space even more. And I think it's a telling sign as to where the industry's going and what people think of the future. However, at the same time, I think there's some big risks that are being taken. But needless to say, I think that there's probably some stuff that we don't know that I think more people that are extremely connected to do know, but no one really knows until we actually get the announcement from the DEA. But again, I think it was another step in the right direction for some of the feedback that we had discussions with this week in Las Vegas, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's switch to headline 2 in Ohio. Ben, interesting. I don't know what this means or what this is going to entail, but a Republican state lawmaker in Ohio has introduced a bill to partially gut the voter-approved ballot measure that legalized recreational marijuana earlier this month, setting the stage for a possible legislative battle. Should investors at all read into this very much? Should they be concerned?
Well, if the adult use law is repealed in any way, if they're successful with that, then it could be a little concerning. It could hit sales on the adult use level if they're able to restrict, purchases in the state. But I think overall, it's just amazing how many people are going after this. Right? You had the Republican Senate leader go after it in Ohio. You had Mike DeWine go after it, and now lawmakers are going after it. So. Unlike other votes, ballot measures that have passed, this seems to be a very concerted effort from certain powerful Republicans in the state to really go after it, more than I can remember in other states that voters passed the ballot and it legalized no problem. So I'm not sure what's going on in Ohio, but yes, if they're able to repeal what can be bought and some of the covenants of what is allowed, then it could be restrictive.
Moment of truth, Anthony. Give me your take on this. What is going on?
So it was issue 2 was a statute, not a constitutional amendment. So in the state of Ohio, if it's not a constitutional amendment, that means that lawmakers can add or subtract at will. However, the lawmaker that is spearheading the initiatives we were reading about, he said that he's putting this out there to educate the general public and to create a dialogue. He doesn't necessarily want to implement these. He wants the people of Ohio to understand thoroughly what they've passed with issue 2. I actually don't have a problem with this because the mandates or the provisions that he would like to see or that he's bringing to the light from a communications perspective are municipalities can vote to limit the amount of dispensaries that are in their jurisdiction. That's common practice. You see it in Florida. You see it in Colorado. That's not a big outlier to me. He wants to reduce the amount of the tax revenue that goes to social equity applicants from 30% and change down to 19% and change. And he wants the actual people of Ohio to be educated to the point to know that pre-existing people with charges are getting preferential treatment to normal Ohio citizens. I think that's practical. I don't see anything wrong with that as well.
So big picture, is this like when you first glance at this, is this really a political battle, or is this actually maybe not a bad thing?
No, they're being thorough. They're being thorough. They want to create dialogue, and they want to just make sure that they're checking all the boxes before this goes into motion. Because once it goes into motion, that cat is not going to be, or that genie's not going to be put back in the bottle. I don't have a problem with this. The headline was kind of sketchy at face value, but it looks like they're doing it to genuinely create dialogue and implement practices that we're seeing in other markets. So I don't think it's a net negative as per what's going on right now in Ohio.
What headline isn't sketchy these days in the media industry, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, while we were in Vegas, there's been some pretty important news that came out as we switched to psychedelics, where behemoth in the space, Cybin, announced some very, very strong data pertaining to their phase 2 trial. So this is the whole point of this podcast today. Our guest of the week, we want to bring in the CEO of Cybin, Doug Drysdale. to dive into these results and some of the feedback that's in. So let's welcome in Mr. Drysdale. Good to see you. Happy Friday, and congrats on the latest data results that were announced yesterday. How has your day been?
Oh, what a great day yesterday. Yeah, fantastic. We've obviously been waiting for these results for a long time, and we were expecting to see benefits from the second dose. But what we're seeing is just phenomenal. I mean, 79% of patients in remission after a couple of doses is just unheard of. So we couldn't be happy.
Doug, in your point of view, how effective are these results to like, let's say one day we see like the FDA approve and commercialization of this drug? Like, how big of a step in the right direction were yesterday's results pertaining to that?
I think it shifts things quite significantly. If we can repeat these kind of results in phase 3, it sort of changes maybe it changes the thinking around when psychedelics should be used. If you've got the option of dosing someone with an SSRI and waiting 12 weeks before there's benefit, and then significant side effects in a lot of patients, and then having to be on those treatments for years, why wouldn't you? If you could take 80% of people and put them into remission after a couple of doses, why wouldn't you start there? Or at least do that very early in the process, rather than letting people's depression just continue and continue.
What's been the feedback been like so far? Like, have you spoken to many biotech analysts, and what's their feedback been like? And, I think yesterday, as far as the press conference that you had, or the call that you had in New York, was there a lot of support from many institutions? And what's their feedback been like as well?
Yeah, I mean, all of our analysts were there pretty much in the room, and many of them have been covering depression studies for decades, and of course, like us, they've never seen anything like this. It's really pretty spectacular, and not just the scale of the results, the sort of 80% remission rate, but just happening so rapidly after just a couple of doses. So this really was a shift in the landscape yesterday. And of course, our institutions, we've had tons of calls from investors. We did a fundraise recently. The folks that came into that are obviously very, very happy with these results. It's just the beginning now.
Ben, you want to jump in and ask something? Go ahead.
Now, Doug, with a combined score of the 12 and 16 milligram dose, 13.75 points on reduction in the Matters scale. Obviously, there's a lot of cushion given that other depression medication versus placebo or have yielded less than 2% reduction on Matters scale. So, should investors feel confident or comfortable knowing that even if the phase 3, even if variability kicks in and the Matters score reduction aren't as robust as what we saw in the phase 2, that there's still so much buffer that it could still be approved and be a frontline medication anyway?
Yeah, exactly. Even if we saw half of these results in phase 3, we would be pretty impressed. But what I think is really interesting in the results is the consistency. So we saw a 14-point reduction with a single dose of 12 milligrams. And then we saw a 13-point reduction from a single dose of 16 milligrams. And then when we look at placebo patients who got a placebo first, and then they got an active drug, they also had on average a 14-point reduction. So we've got 3 data sets, from a single dose. Each single dose seems to deliver a 14-point reduction fairly consistently.
Now, were you surprised, Doug, that the 16 milligram dose didn't appear to have a greater reduction in Matters score? And if so, do you plan to roll with the 12 milligram dose in the phase 3 because it produced the best result?
Yeah, that's exactly the purpose of dose ranging, right? You want to keep pushing the dose up and keep improving the results, the outcomes, until you get to a point where you're not getting any more benefit. So it's clear that 16 milligram, the experiences were a little more intense with the 16 milligrams. Side effects were a little bit higher, but nothing to worry about. So it looks like 12 milligrams is going to be where we land. That seems most likely.
It was noted too that the trial plan for the upcoming phase 3 it aligns with what the FDA is requiring, I should say. Can you elaborate on what that means?
Yeah, so look, we've got several data points that guide us to what the phase 3 should look like. We've got the draft guidelines from FDA that came out a few months ago. Obviously, Compass has their phase 3 program. That plan is all public, and of course, they've had that signed off with FDA. So, a couple of different data sets. So we'll be recruiting in the phase 3 same population of patients, so moderate to severe patients with depression, taking SSRIs and SNRIs. And I think that's really important to remember that we don't have to titrate patients off those medications, which is a huge benefit for them and for their physicians as well. We'll be giving them 2 doses. Clearly now we're seeing that 2 doses has a massive advantage. And that's always been our theory, that a second dose would improve on the first dose.
Yeah.
And that's because a lot of people don't get across the line with the first dose. Or maybe they're a little bit anxious or they're a little bit resistant. But of course, going into the second dose, they know exactly what to expect. So they're more relaxed and more into the session. So it'll be about 220 patients, 2 doses versus placebo. I'm hoping to kick that off by the end of Q1 next year.
Doug, one thing I wanted to bring up too is that, look, your background being in biotech for many, many years, you have lots of contacts within Big Pharma. Have you had any contacts from Big Pharma that have reached out to say great results? And, we've, can speculate, but a lot of the times when you get into phase 3s, if there is some compelling data, Big Pharma may come in and start to sponsor some of these trials with some of these companies. But what has been, I guess, maybe some of the dialogue? Have you had anything with some of your, I guess, network of people based on the length of your career in this space?
Yeah, we've had many, many discussions with many pharma companies over the years. And, they've been watching the space develop. They've been watching it consolidate. They've been watching the development of these molecules mature. And so, we're now getting more programs that are getting out of phase 2 and towards phase 3. We've got several really positive reactions to the phase 2 data. This is kind of what they've been waiting for. I mean, there's no sense in them rushing.
Yep.
So the data is obviously very compelling. I know that they'll be watching the end of phase 2 meeting results that we'll have, I guess, sometime in the first quarter, maybe by end of February. I
think we're losing
making sure that
we're losing him a little bit here.
And the treatments are.
Yeah. Doug, honestly, we're going to probably, I'll follow up with you afterwards, but I want to get you at least on to talk a little bit about some of the results, which is pretty compelling. And at the same time, too, get a general sense of some of the interest levels that are happening between the biotech analysts and institutions, but it sounds very strong. To all our viewers out there, we're just running into a little bit of technical difficulties, but what we'll probably do on Monday is have a follow-up interview with Doug that will get recorded and sent out to our network. But again, appreciate you obviously on the short notice taking time to sit down with us here today. And again, congrats on everything that has unfolded this week and a big step in the right direction for the overall space and more notably your company. But great work to say the least.
Thanks, guys. Good to chat. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Let's talk next week.
All right. Thanks, Doug. Appreciate your time. Big week, that's for sure, for that company. But yeah, I'm curious to see, like you guys have always indicated in the past that, hey, get to phase 2. If there's strong results, what you'll probably see, and if it's compelling, for big pharma companies to come in and start sponsoring some of these phase 3 trials. But, Ben, you honestly understand the space more than anything. Like, what's your take on that? Do they need it? Obviously, after the raise and the 30 million, they don't. But what a heavy endorsement that would be to be working with a big pharma company.
It would, but I'm not sure if they even need it at this point. I mean, if I'm Doug Drysdale, if I'm in his shoes, I don't even know if I'd want to give a piece of the results, do any sort of royalty or anything like that. I mean, we're talking about 13.75 reduction in matter score. If they're going with the 12 milligram, it's over 14. And that's the one takeaway I had from the call yesterday, is that even if there's greater variability, as the question I asked Doug, even if there's greater variability and the results are less, say reduction in matter scores are 10, against placebo, standard SSRI medication averages under 2 points reduction in matter score. So it's possible that they could receive less robust results by a factor of half and still be a frontline treatment for MDD. I mean, that's how good the results are. The buffer with their research is so high that they can afford to, lose some results and still be the standard treatment if it goes through with safety.
So the idea is,
I'm not sure. They're cashed up. And you got to remember, in terms of the cash profile, they have $30 million raised. They have 18.1 million on their balance sheet as of their last financial report. And they also have 34 million US from the warrant exercise, which is only at 51 cents. And they also have a shelf registration for 125 million. So they can tap into that if they need to. Plus some other warrants on their cap table. So in terms of cash, they don't need big pharma cash.
Okay. So even with the big name endorsement like that, does not make sense to piece this off right now.
No, I don't think so, because they'd have to piece it off. They'd have to give a royalty, and they can just get a top quality CRO to do their conduct a trial. And as long as they're funded, if they weren't funded, that might be another thing. But I think they're fully funded for this, especially given how robust the research is. They're going to have money is not going to be an issue.
Anthony, did you see the results? I know that you were reading a little bit yesterday morning while we were in Vegas.
I mean, I think Ben's spot on with his analysis, and I mean, I think that I stand by my statement. Obviously, this isn't financial advice, but I truly do believe that Cybin is the most investable company in the psychedelic space. Yeah, especially when you're taking into account what's publicly traded. Yeah. Doug has the data, he has the financial tools, he has the human capital, and he has the strategic investors that are involved right now to where they can go it alone, and they probably can create immense value on the backside of all of this. Yeah. I don't think they need, just like Ben said, I don't think they need a big pharma crutch. I don't think they need a big marquee name to come in and get this over the finish line. That's what Doug has set out to do from day one. And I do truly believe that he's going to do that, whether it be with 003 or whether it be with one of the DMT therapies. They will get something over the line because the data is resounding that they keep reporting on. Yeah.
You know what? You almost forget about, and I commented this on a post yesterday on Twitter, but you almost forget about the fact that they have the DMT program. I mean, just on what we're seeing on CYB003 alone, that is hugely investable. Again, because of that buffer. I mean, that's so important that they scored so high, because the results could still have, and everything's all good. But the DMT program is almost equally as exciting. Not quite as far in the research front, but I mean, these are two really, really strong programs.
Yeah, I would let Doug speak on this on Monday. I'm actually going to ask him, but I'd be willing to bet from an IP and a patent perspective, the DMT portfolio probably is more defensible than 003 from an IP standpoint.
Either way, that small pharma acquisition gets more and more attractive each day, does it not, gents?
Yeah, especially what they paid for it. I mean,
I know.
They got it at a very, very attractive price.
Yet here's the stock on the short term. I was surprised. I really thought that this could move a little bit based on the latest news, but obviously the share price did not perform, relatively flat for the most part after yesterday's announcement. Were you surprised at all by that, Ben?
Yes and no. I mean, mostly no, just because you got to remember it's in phase 2. The beginning of the phase 3 won't start until probably the back half of 2024. Yeah. So by the time they get the trial design, everything up and running, and the first patients in the clinic, you're talking like maybe 9 months to a year. And then the results of that are going to be that's probably a 2 to 3 year process just to get the final results. So there's still a lot of time in between now and then. So a lot of people perhaps don't want to park their money now. Even though if you're buying now, it could be at a discount if everything goes to distance. Obviously, you're looking at a big gain. But I mean, to park your money now, there's still a lot of time to go. And also the interim results on October 31st. A lot of this was already known, and nothing, maybe not as many surprises in this particular report.
This is the TDR Traded Black podcast here on the Benzinga Television Network. I'm your host, Shad Dales, with Benjamin A. Smith and Anthony Varrell. Happy Friday, everybody. A lot of Cybin followers here. Taylor Daniels writes, how was your trip, Anthony? Did you have a good time in Vegas?
It's fantastic. It was great. I enjoyed MJ Biz a lot. It was good to see everybody. A lot of the usual suspects were there. But it's nice to see our clients in person.
I know.
Versus just having them in the virtual space. But to be honest, I mean, I think the biggest data point that I took away was that conversation that we had, Shad, where it was the person that we were speaking to, we were speaking with a lot of conviction as well, that we're not worried about pharma. We're not worried about alcohol. We're not worried about tobacco from a lobbying perspective. Who could be pulling the strings behind the scenes is the private prison lobby. That makes a lot of sense. Definitely was eye-opening to think about.
Don't they benefit from having more incarcerations from cannabis?
Correct. So Biden goes and says, all right, we're letting all the nonviolent cannabis offenders out. That's an immediate impact to their bottom line.
And how many is that?
A lot. I don't know. I'd be talking out of my ass if I threw
100,000, 200,000. And what a contract those guys have. That is from the government, the state, and they just.
It's a very lucrative business, to say the least.
So are you suggesting that lobby is trying to keep everything buttoned up?
I'm saying that if we needed to worry about a lobbyist, that's probably where the arguments would be coming from. Not pharma, not tobacco, not alcohol, private prisons. They arguably would have the most to lose.
Right. Smaller crowd this year compared to years past, but I do want to note that a lot of the big players that were in the space that were at the event, but it definitely was a smaller crowd this year. But I think there was some really interesting meetings and important meetings that were taking place. But I think for the most part, people that got into the city and got out and right back to work, other than a few that are watching Bono.
You tried to talk me into staying for another day to see the Pac-12 championship.
We were halfway to the airport and we were talking about some of the strip is still a mess. The F1 aftermath, the bleachers still up everywhere. And then the cab driver basically said, yeah, you wait till you guys see tomorrow. Pac-12, Oregon, Washington at Allegiant Stadium. And then Anthony looks over at me and says, we should stay.
No, I said, if we knew beforehand, I would have considered staying.
Come on, buddy.
Much different statement.
So I pushed it hard for about 10 minutes and he was just like, no chance.
No, I was ready to get home.
Yeah, that's for sure. Bone-in ribeye at the filet mignon at Mastro's. There's their endorsement. If you want to have a good steak, that probably could be the best steak I've ever had. That was incredible. With
Ricky Bobby had Outback. TDR's got Mastro's.
Yeah, exactly.
From a sponsor perspective,
and glazed with blue cheese. That changes things. One thing I wanted to bring up as well. We were talking about Cybin, but earnings came out, and some of you have actually commented, is like, when are we going to be doing the latest update coverage on Numinous? I'm actually doing an interview with Peyton Nyquist tomorrow morning. We will be posting that on Sunday evening. But Ben, he got it to $1 million run rate. What's your thoughts on the latest earnings, and what's the, I guess, perceived notion that investors should take away moving forward pertaining to the company?
Yeah, clearly from an operational perspective, the getting the cash burn rate to under $1 million in October, as Peyton had stated, was the company goal, was sort of one of the biggest takeaways, obviously. With 8.4 million on the books, that, getting that burn down to an acceptable level is very paramount. So I think that's a big reason why the stock has, performed fairly well off the earnings. I mean, obviously it's not a gangbuster price action, but it's a good, solid couple cents off, some very low levels. And so you did see some buying there. And also I think sales is pretty, and the clinic visitations are pretty stable. I think they consolidated one clinic, so the aggregate number was down a little bit, but if you average it out on a per clinic basis, it was up. And revenues were up a little under 2%. So everything, the business is very stable. Getting the burn rate down was key. And now, I'm awaiting, MAPS and the Series A. Obviously, it could be a peripheral beneficiary of that. I'm still waiting for all those details.
Yeah.
And kind of go from there.
Yeah. George Shaw writes, what are the current laws and regulations regarding the cultivation, distribution, and sale of cannabis in Ohio? Either one of you care to elaborate on that?
I don't understand I don't understand the question. I mean, it's adult use. You go through the licensing process with the state, and that's if you pass it's a limited license state. They don't even have applications that are open. Yeah.
I think that pretty much answers it. Terry Daniels writes, are there any pending legislative changes or discussions that could impact the cannabis industry in Ohio? Ben, Anthony?
I think not unless the Republican leadership comes in and steps in a big way. Like I said, the GOP Senate Majority Leader, he was talking about getting this repealed some way, somehow. Mike DeWine, the governor, although he did suggest that although he's not for it, he would probably not maneuver against it. And then that Republican lawmaker that we just talked about. So I don't know. I'm assuming that nothing's going to come in and really repeal what the voters have elected on, but. As Anthony noted, it's not constitutional, so anything is possible.
Germany legalization next week. John Varrell, who's a regular on the show, writes. I have no idea if that's the case or not. No one really knows, but that'll be interesting to see if we get some legalization announcements, as we touched on that earlier this week, how those lawmakers came to agree to modify that marijuana bill. But we will be doing a nice mainstream media first 5 minutes of our podcast on Friday that addresses the fact that we don't just favor Monday. We don't just favor Curaleaf and talk about specific companies. Tilray is definitely a company that would benefit from that. So
yeah, I mean, we'll address it on Monday with the press conference. But for people to say that we favor Curaleaf, I don't own stock in Curaleaf. You guys don't own stock in Curaleaf. Curaleaf's not a paid client. No. Curaleaf just happens to be doing a lot of the things right. And we can't sit here and mention every company that's in Germany when we talk about Germany. Curaleaf happens to be the only MSO that is levered to Germany. Yeah. So, I mean, it's not favoritism. It's just talking points, and it's what we're reading throughout the day. We can get into all of this on Monday. I've got a laundry list of things.
I want to report this like it's like late breaking 6 o'clock news. So, Ben, Anthony, I'm just kindly asking you that we all show up in suits, shirt and ties on.
I'll be wearing a suit and tie like Timmy Seymour on Monday. I can assure you of that.
Ben, you good with that, buddy?
Suit and tie?
Suit and tie.
Not usually my MO, but I can.
I might even wear a bow tie for the event.
Let's do it. I think that pretty much wraps it up. What a week it's been though in Vegas. I don't know if there's anything. Canopy.
Canopy officially stole BioSteel. That is why the stock was moving today. It was up as much as 12% intraday. I'm still getting hosed and trying to get fancy on those options. I really screwed myself there. But hey, you live and you learn.
Yeah, that's for sure. Mitch, producer, how was the week, brother? Did you have a good one? Got any good lasting music for us as we wrap up this week?
It was awesome, but I will tell the chat, definitely check out the Planet 13 video and the TerraSen and Cannabis video. I can tell you guys right now, I was enjoying these this morning. You might enjoy them yourself. There, the links are in the chat, so you guys can click and continue the content going, baby.
He's such a smart guy.
That voice just makes me want to go watch all of those videos.
Oh, by the way, that actually reminds me. How was the Planet 13?
Fantastic.
Right?
112,000 square feet. And the Larry Scheffler, the co-CEO of the space, guy's a legend. You don't even see those people like the Al Davises of the world, even though they're not from Vegas, but they have so much history and story to tell about the history of Vegas. He just strikes me as a down-to-earth guy that just takes chances, and man, he's benefiting it. But really, the impression that I got and how they're kind of picking their lane, they're really buying some key real estate locations across the U.S. and generating dispensaries that are an ultimate destination, not only for locals, but for tourists across the world. And it's a smart strategy.
Yeah,
actually, I don't know if you know about this, Anthony, but they have a super center coming in Miami.
They do. Yeah, we talked about it on the interview.
Oh, right.
Next year, Ben, we're going out back because they're building a consumption lounge. This place looks unreal. And you're coming, buddy.
Next year? Okay.
We'll have a segment called The Hash Report with Ben. All right.
Hash.
Yeah. Anyways, okay, that's been a good week. But for the most part, just a quick recap. Some news out of Ohio, but based on the actual title itself, don't get too alarmed based on, a battle happening in Ohio and some changes being made on the adult use landscape as well. CEO Doug Drysdale came in, joined us, and basically in a nutshell said that these are some of the best, if not the best results of data that this industry has performed. So a lot of positive momentum regarding this company moving forward. And a few other things that we touched on. Canopy obviously closed, made it official today with the BioSteel, or I should say the sale of BioSteel, which is why the stock ran. And then finally, True Leave made it official today that they are
They're not debt free. They're $130 million less of debt.
That's correct. All right, gents. Listen, great week. Anthony, good seeing you. Ben, way to hold the fort down once again. And we'll see everybody back here on Monday. And this is the TDR Trade Black podcast here on the Benzinga Television Network. I'm your host, Shad Dales, along with Anthony and Ben. Enjoy your weekend. And we'll check back in with all of you again here on Monday. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. And if you want to learn more about the emerging industries that we cover, then leave a comment below and let us know who you want us to interview, the questions you want asked, and the information that you want to learn. We want to hear from you. As usual, click on that bell for all notifications to get the latest information. Share this video with your network, and don't forget